Hey everyone, welcome to the 12th episode of The Power of Bold. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Power of Bold. My name's Adam Pasquarella, and I'm really happy that you're here. I hope you're excited for the beginning of fall. It's really crazy how fast the year has flown by. So just in case you missed our last episode, I spoke with Leah Gervais, who is my girlfriend and the founder of Urban20something.com, which is a website focused on helping young adults escape quarter-life traps. She has also recently released a course on personal branding called Urban 20 Someone. So if you'd like to learn more, you can visit the show notes of the last episode that's on our website. For this episode, it's just going to be me reviewing a book that's a bit older, but one that has really helped me strengthen my creativity in my professional and personal life. I think that it can really help you do the same, regardless of whether you're an entrepreneur or non-entrepreneur. The book is also from some of the most creative employees at one of the world's most creative companies. It's called The Imagineering Way, and it's by the Imagineers in the Walt Disney Company. Now, what I'm going to do is give a brief introduction about the book, and then summarize the most important lessons from each of the 6 sections of the book. Okay, let's get into it. So, ever since I was a kid, I've been interested in the Walt Disney Company, and I know I'm not alone. I just really enjoyed the stories and the creativity that I would see in Disney movies and television shows. But with that said, I was really obsessed with the theme parks. My family and I would often go to Disney World in Florida. We basically considered it our vacation home. From there, we would explore the Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, and the Animal Kingdom. I was so obsessed with the Disney theme parks that I applied to be a contributor to a Birnbaum travel guide called Walt Disney World for Kids by Kids. I was eventually accepted, and when I was 12 years old, this was back in 2001, I joined 3 other contributors to travel to Disney World, where we rode most of the rides and offered our reviews, which were later printed in the book. It was a great experience and one that I'll never forget. I, along with many, enjoy Disney theme parks because they provide the ultimate immersive experience. Sure, many other theme parks do a good job with theming, but I think Disney does it best because of their creativity and their attention to detail. From the intricate 1920s theming of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror to the backstory behind the Blizzard Beach water park, Disney knows the importance of story and the importance of execution in making that story come to life. There are countless examples of this, and I'll provide some links in the show notes. Now, the wizards behind these theme parks are affectionately called Imagineers. Walt Disney Imagineering itself was founded in 1952, so that Walt Disney could build Disneyland, the world's first theme park. The name Imagineering combines imagination with engineering, and current-day Imagineers bring together art and science to turn reality and dreams into magic. And these Imagineers not only design all Disney theme parks, but they design the resorts, rides, cruise ships, real estate developments, and regional entertainment venues around the world. Imagineering has a long history since Walt Disney himself created this group of amazing people. And there are countless books on the Imagineers' history and how they create magic within the Disney company. I personally recommend the book Walt Disney Imagineering by the Imagineers, which is a picture-heavy book talking about how Imagineers design the rides at Disney parks. In addition, there are 2 good books by Marty Sklar, who is a legendary Disney Imagineer who worked with Walt Disney himself. The first book is called Dream It, Do It, My Half-Century Creating Disney's Magic Kingdoms. The second is One Little Spark, Mickey's 10 Commandments and the Road to Imagineering. Unfortunately, Sklar died this year, but these books provide pretty interesting stories on how Disney theme parks were designed. And again, I'll provide links in the show notes. That said, we're going to focus on a different book today. Like I said, it's called The Imagineering Way, Ideas to Ignite Your Creativity. The book is more on the process of how Imagineers come up with and execute their ideas, and how you can use a similar framework in your personal life or in your business. Overall, I think it's a solid book. People familiar with Disney parks would especially like the book, but even people that aren't as familiar with Disney can take some insights from the book and can try adopting the Imagineers' thinking in their own lives. This book is from 2003, and it's a quick book, about 200 pages. It includes short essays from a variety of Imagineers, along with random doodles and drawings to illustrate some of the concepts in the Imagineers' essays. While I don't think there are as many actionable insights from this book compared to others that I've reviewed, it's a fun and entertaining read, and there are a few nuggets you can take from it. Now, the book is divided into 6 broad sections. Their titles are, first, the introduction, second, the sky's the limit, third, growing a culture, fourth, unharnessing creativity, fifth, 1,000 balls in the air, and sixth, adopting and adapting the Imagineering way. So what I'm going to do is briefly go through each of these 6 sections and describe the most notable insights that I took from each section. Ready? Okay, let's do it. Like I said, Section 1 is the introduction to the book. The Imagineers here are giving a brief description of what they do and their ultimate views on creativity. They say that when it comes to creativity, anything goes. The formula for creativity is that there is no formula. While they do define goals and establish clear objectives before embarking on any project, there is no established formula when making the magic. They make a somewhat obvious but important point, and that is that fear is the worst enemy of creativity. They try to do everything they can to make brainstorming a safe place, so that people can toss out any ideas. When going into blue sky brainstorming at Imagineering, they go in with the understanding that there are no silly or dumb ideas. They encourage people to take chances, knowing that their peers will reserve judgment. And while I think most companies would say that they offer similar environments, most people still feel hesitant to raise an idea because they fear looking stupid. Some company cultures are better at embracing blue sky thinking and brainstorming without judgment than others. The Imagineers say that nothing is worse than doing nothing for fear of feeling silly, inferior, or even fearing that they aren't creative. They say that everyone can be creative, and it's an inspiring message. Ultimately, you just need to create the right environment so that people can feel like they can take risks, and the Imagineers talk about how to do this in later sections of the book. Okay, that's the crux of the introduction section. It's about 11 pages. Section 2 of the book is titled The Sky's the Limit. This is the first real substantive part of the book, and it goes to this idea of blue sky thinking and that a blank sheet of paper can be the most frightening thing in the world or the greatest opportunity in the world. This idea is in the first essay by Marty Sklar, who is the legendary Imagineer that I mentioned earlier. Sklar and the Imagineers are really hammering this point that, first, people think they aren't creative or fear being creative, and second, that being creative or sharing your ideas isn't as scary as you may think. Sklar acknowledges that making that first mark on the sheet of paper can make even the most courageous among us think twice. But failure is inevitable in the creative process, so you and your company must embrace a culture of risk-taking, which the Imagineers admit is a rare thing. Conformity is too often prized as a virtue. In fact, while most of us think we aren't creative, the Imagineers emphasize that we are creative. It's most often shown when we're kids. To a child, a chair or sofa can be a ship sailing on a sea of carpet, for instance. Kids are fearless and free in their thinking and play, and we can absolutely adopt the same mentality as adults. It's within us. The thing that stops us is fear of being judged by others. So while the sky's the limit and we should be fearless in our brainstorming, we need to sell ideas, whether they're so-called traditional ideas or more groundbreaking ideas. So this section goes a little bit into the idea selling process. I really liked one analogy that an Imagineer used when discussing how to sell an idea. He says to think of your audience as a little bunny rabbit hiding in the bushes, sensing food but fearing danger. You want the rabbit to feast on your idea, but you first have to coax him out from the bushes and convince him it's safe to take a nibble. So if you develop a concept that upsets the status quo, a big change can be scary to take in all at once. So to coax the bunny, which is the audience, out, you should do it with a tasty sample of what's to come, and then carefully introduce the benefits of the big picture. Sometimes the bunny will disappear after the first nibble, but other times it'll stick around. I thought this was a great analogy when selling an off-the-wall idea that you think will truly work, especially if you work in a conservative industry. It's a way to avoid completely turning off your audience at the beginning. Just give them a little taste and have them begging for more. This section also provides some additional tactics you can use when thinking of and selling ideas. One Imagineer touts the value of visual aids, regardless of how well you can draw. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words, and especially so when you're trying to convince someone else of your idea. He also recommends that when you're stuck during the creative process, take a walk. I find this advice to always be helpful. I've noticed, just like the Imagineer, that thinking about something else is exactly what your brain needs to get unstuck. The idea just comes to you, whether it's when you're on a nice stroll, working out, or most often when you're in the shower. This idea shows up again in later sections of the book, so stay tuned. Ultimately, blue sky thinking can be a great thing. Sure, there are challenges, most notably the fact that people are embarrassed to offer their ideas out of fear of judgment, or they feel like they aren't creative enough. Imagineers say that you and your organization should do everything to dismiss these thoughts, and we'll go further into this in a minute. Everyone can be creative, just look at us as kids, and your organization should embrace a judgment-free culture in brainstorming sessions, no matter how tough that can be. When selling ideas that challenge the status quo, think about dripping out some of the content in your pitch, perhaps with visual aids. And if you feel stuck during the blue sky process, take a walk. So for the third part of this book, the Imagineers talk about how to actually grow a culture that embraces this risk-taking blue sky attitude. Honestly, I thought this was one of the weaker sections of the book, but there are a few good nuggets here. The Imagineers first discuss the importance of mentorship, and I really like one story from one of the Imagineers who was obsessed with audio animatronics as a kid. Audio animatronics are those automated creatures that you see in rides at Disney World. Anyway, this Imagineer was obsessed with Pirates of the Caribbean when he first saw it as a 14-year-old, and he had built his own audio animatronic parrot in his garage. Disney Imagineers heard about this, and one sent him a wonderful introductory letter. He would frequently correspond with the Imagineer, who took a genuine interest in what this 14-year-old was trying to do. He chose to be his mentor, and the mentee ultimately became an Imagineer himself. This Imagineer argues that similar mentoring relationships and the creation of the legacies produced by them are a cultural tradition that is unique to Imagineering. Mentoring involves giving, the need to respect people, and embracing the human bond. So embracing mentorship is a great way to develop a risk-taking attitude in your organization. Mentors shouldn't provide every answer. Rather, they should ask, why do you think it is this way? And have the mentee figure it out themselves. Now, another way to foment creativity in an organization is to literally design the environment to embrace creativity. At Disney Imagineering and at Pixar, designers decorate their workspaces according to their own individual tastes. Whatever inspires and feeds their imagination is the order of the day. The Imagineers even share the story of how they reorganized their cafeteria, which initially had white walls and exceedingly plain tables, to a more creative area. The Imagineers worked together on the project during their spare time to figure out a way to make their cafeteria feel like a more inspiring place. It not only would pay dividends down the road in terms of inspiring their future ideas, but it brought the individuals closer together. Along with all of this, the Imagineers spend a good amount of time talking about how they cast teams. They say that good casting begins with self-awareness, specifically by recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses. It's important to cast ego aside, and accept the fact you're probably very good at certain tasks and bad at others. Then, you have to identify strengths and weaknesses in other people. Make mental notes when you can, and recognize that personality quirks, even very strange ones, can often become strengths on a team. And it's important to have a team that supports each other with a single vision. Otherwise, you may wind up with a project that's only okay, rather than fantastic. Ultimately, the most successful teams set and carefully nurture a working environment where fixing blame is unimportant, and victories and defeats are shared uniformly across discipline boundaries. Now, these are all great things, and I still think one of the shortcomings of the book is that it doesn't go into more detail on these specific issues. Again, it's more about defining how the Imagineering team works and lessons you can take from that. But as far as the nitty-gritty, the book doesn't provide it. Finally, the section ends with a couple notable insights about conflict. The Imagineers say that everyone who has passion for an idea can become very emotional, and the passion can be about ideas, the budget, or the schedule. Imagineers recommend that you let the conflict occur, and that you and your employees shouldn't be afraid to participate in a passionate environment. But before responding to a point you disagree with, take a breath before you react. Along with this, don't take conflict personally. Fight for your work, but don't fight on a personal level. So let's move on to the fourth section of the book. It's titled Unharnessing Creativity. It's a section on how you can actually channel the creative process during blue sky brainstorming sessions. This is another quick section with a few cool insights. To start, I liked how an Imagineer, who was a project director of creative development, discussed the process of coming up with an idea. He calls it an on-ramp to Imagineering way. Like when you're driving down a freeway and suddenly realize you've traveled several miles towards your destination, in perfect safety and comfort, but you really have no recollection of how you got there. The Imagineer says that we have two brains, one that is strict and regimented, and the other which is wild and spontaneous. We just have to find a way to keep the disciplined side of our brains busy, and we'll be more susceptible to creative ideas. And that's why driving is such a petri dish of creativity. When you're driving a car, your disciplined brain is working overtime, and your undisciplined brain is out in space, dreaming and thinking, inventing, and creating. So he says that the thing about creativity is this: don't think about it. And that's the perfect strategy because it leaves the productive parts of your brain free to work. I love this whole essay, and I could relate, especially as I take walks in New York City. Your mind is preoccupied, and your subconscious can play, coming up with ideas that you normally wouldn't consider if you're sitting alone at your desk or in your bedroom. If you're in a creative funk, I'd highly recommend getting out of the room and distracting your disciplined brain so your undisciplined brain can play. But if you're really stuck, one Imagineer suggests that you reverse engineer the ultimate outcome you want until you arrive at the solution. Imagine the experience that you want people to have. Visualize the success of your idea. Then work your way backward to the solution until you find the obstacle. Then sleep on it, put it aside, and do something else. Wash the dishes, go play tennis, go to the beach. And suddenly, you'll find the block is gone, and you're ready to start. Through all of this, you'll have some doubts about naysayers, even if you work at a place like Disney where blue sky thinking is the norm. The Imagineers say that to get started, you need some affirmation from the outside. But if you rely only on affirmation from others, you'll find yourself starting to listen to the naysayers, and you'll eventually fail. You ultimately have to find the security of affirmation from within. But like being creative, everyone had this self-belief and affirmation when they were younger, when they were singing their hearts out in front of family and friends, who applauded even though they may have been awful. That early affirmation gave us the strength to keep practicing until we are good. And then eventually, you become strong enough, so much of your affirmation comes from within. So for those naysayers, the Imagineers say they aren't malicious. They're the ones that need affirmation. It's your responsibility to keep the naysayers from draining you. While this is much easier said than done, I liked this message, and it's an inspirational piece of advice as you stretch your creative wings. So let's move on to the fifth section of the book. It's titled 1,000 Balls in the Air. It's about making the dream come true, changing perceptions, succeeding and failing, juggling deadlines, and facing challenges. This chapter is kind of a mix of insights from Imagineers on the creative process in general. It's kind of all over the place, but that's exactly what a book on creativity should be, I suppose. Some of the more interesting insights in this section come from the challenges that Imagineers faced when constructing rides at some of the Disney theme parks. For instance, there's a climactic scene in the Indiana Jones adventure in Disneyland where the ride vehicle suddenly starts backing up as a giant boulder comes running toward the vehicle. You probably know this scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a cool effect, but the Imagineers were having trouble designing this part of the ride. A senior vice president of creative development said that having a ride vehicle back up in the middle of the ride was something that was just never done before, since it wasn't possible. So how did they solve this problem? It's actually fascinating. They embraced blue sky thinking, removed all judgment from potential solutions to the problem, and recognized that they needed to reframe the problem. Instead of making the vehicle actually back up, the vehicle doesn't move. Rather, your vehicle is stopped and the walls and the ceiling are the things moving, giving you the undeniable feeling that you're traveling backward. All through life, our minds have been taught that small things move and big things don't. So it must be your vehicle moving, not the entire cave. The inspiration for this super clever idea came from a car wash, where the senior vice president was sitting in one of those self-service machines at a gas station where you pull your car in and park while brushes and spray heads mounted above and beside slowly travel back and forth. As the Imagineer was sitting in the car, waiting for the car wash to begin, he found himself suddenly pressing the brake pedal, thinking his car was rolling backward. But it was the cleaning machine that had begun to move. The perception of the car being in motion was totally convincing, even when he knew the reality. Now, I think this was an awesome story. The Imagineer says that sometimes when you see the answer to a perplexing challenge, it doesn't register in your mind because it's framed in such a completely different context that you can't recognize the connection. His advice is to keep your eyes open, look at everything around you, and, most important, keep flipping your perspective around in other directions, even backward. I think it's really good advice, and the story illustrates the necessity of changing your mental model of the problem and potential solutions. Another story I really liked involves a ride at Disney's California Adventure at Disneyland. The story was from an engineer, and it illustrates the need and importance of boiling things down to essentials and communicating ideas in a way that everyone can understand. The Imagineer was in the early stages of designing the Grizzly River Run, which is a whitewater raft attraction at California Adventure. The team, which included engineers, designers, and 130 other disciplines, was considering how big the mountain should be that houses the ride. The show producer favored a very tall mountain that could be a big visual icon of the park. The project manager wanted a smaller mountain, since rockwork and theming were very expensive. This Imagineer wanted a just the right size mountain, so the water would flow properly. He mentioned the laws of physics don't care one bit about the views of the show producer and project manager. Now, this Imagineer could have pleaded his case by using technical terms like the trough hydraulic radius, the specific energy curve, hydraulic and energy grade lines. But he knew his audience wouldn't get it, so he decided on a non-technical visual approach. He built a working flume model to demonstrate the principles of open channel water flow and the pitfalls if the right height isn't considered. The model was 12 feet long, made of 2x4 lumber, a couple of plastic wash tubs, some plastic pipe, and a little blue food coloring to make the water show up better. He was able to show the bad things that would happen without the proper height. And in the end, he convinced the team that the just the right size mountain was what they really needed. There are some other challenges he overcame, as he describes in his essay. But the real important thing is the importance of teamwork, receiving perspectives from others dissimilar to you, understanding the power of visual aids, and then communicating your ideas in a way that everyone understands. These are just two stories in this section of the book, and I think it's one of the more interesting sections, where the Imagineers discussed how they took different perspectives, thought outside the metaphorical box, and created magic for Disney guests. These are the sort of things I like hearing about, and if you do as well, I'd reiterate my recommendation for the book Walt Disney Imagineering by the Imagineers. It goes a lot more into the ride design process, and how Imagineers overcame specific challenges when bringing your favorite rides to life. So finally, the last section is a really quick one, just a couple pages, on adopting and adapting the Imagineering way. This concise section was really good since it provides a set of actionable insights that we can take when we try to be more creative. A creative vice president for creative development offers a few so-called kid tips, essentially how we can adopt the Imagineering mentality by looking at the mentality of children. I'm just going to briefly list them now. First, he says, look for the gray. Kids are delighted to explore an endless range of possibilities. Everything has creative potential. Next, look for wonder. Kids notice things like butterflies, sand dollars, and soap bubbles, and are able to see the wonder in each. Next, force connections. Kids have a way of combining seemingly unrelated elements, thus creating new ideas. This helps the mind see relationships differently, opening it up to fresh connections. Then he recommends that we change hats. Kids are great at pretending to be a fireman or a princess. You gain new perspectives by putting yourself in a different situation. Next, allow yourself to dream. Kids spend a lot of time imagining all sorts of strange and wonderful things. This opens your mind to a new world of possibilities. The next piece of advice is to break the rules. Kids move boundaries, add players, or change the point system. This opens the mind to possible creative alternatives. Next, play without bounds or judgments. As adults, we're taught to be severe critics of anything impractical or flippant. Kids, on the other hand, routinely practice doing the impractical and flippant. Play without bounds, and allow the free flow of ideas without judgment. Finally, make it fun. His motto is, if it ain't fun, it ain't done. Kids know the value of humor and playfulness. Great ideas flourish in an atmosphere of fun and silliness. Now, I really liked this list of kid tips, and it's a refreshing take on the idea that creativity is within us. Once again, we were all kids, we were creative once, so we can reignite that fire again. All we have to do is just get over the fear of judgment, fear of being judged by others, and put ourselves out there. Great things can happen. So once again, I enjoyed this book. It's just a fun read into how Imagineers work and express their creativity in their day-to-day jobs. While it seems like Imagineering is a really unique place with an extremely awesome culture, I do think that there are lessons we can take, regardless of where we work and regardless of whether we're entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneurs. And the Imagineers recognize this. Marty Sklar, that legendary Imagineer, provides one final list at the end of the book. It's the top 10 traits that will turn you from a dreamer into a doer. Again, I'm going to list them off here. First, maintain a clear vision. Always have a clear idea where you're going, and take along a roadmap for others to follow. Second, be optimistic. You can be optimistic without being Pollyanna-ish. It's more fun to be around optimists than pessimists. Third, make curiosity your search engine. Fourth, be confident. Believe in your ideas. If you've done your homework and are ready to turn that project on, have confidence in your team and yourself. Fifth, celebrate creativity. You would be amazed at where creative ideas can come from if you remember that no idea, no matter how dumb it may sound, is a bad idea. Sixth, use storytelling to involve your audience. Seventh, wear your guests' shoes. Be empathetic to the audience that you're targeting. Eighth, organize the flow of people and ideas. As an analogy, Walt Disney sent designers to Disneyland to study where people wanted to go, and only then did he pave all the sidewalks and pathways. Ninth, avoid overload. Tell one story at a time. The true act of communication is knowing when enough's enough. And finally, number 10, take a chance. The Imagineers present a quote from Walt Disney himself. The quote is, "Now that I'm a grandfather and getting on in years, I hope I never forget that you have to keep marching in the parade. You have to be willing to take a chance." I like this list, and if I'm in a creative rut, I go to it to self-correct. So ultimately, if you're looking for a creative spark yourself, or if you work for or own a company that you think could be more creative, I'd encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. And if you've been to Disney Parks several times and are interested in how the Imagineers themselves do their work, I'd really recommend that you take a look at it. And as an aside, if you're also interested in how the Disney company as a whole operates and creates magic for its guests, I think about checking out the Disney Institute, which offers courses and blogs looking at the Disney approach to leadership, service, and employee engagement. I'll link to their website in the show notes. So thanks again for tuning in to this episode of The Power of Bold. Take a look at the show notes by visiting thepowerofbold.com and get in touch through social media. Also, if you're really liking the show, I'd greatly appreciate if you can give us a rating and write a review on iTunes. That's it for now. See you next time.